Welcome to another episode of the Bandage Podcast, a weekly wrap-up of the most trending healthcare news. Each week, join me and my co-host Alex Ross as we'll discuss the latest in healthcare, health IT, and compliance.
In this week's episode, we discuss a medical claim analysis software and algorithm to diagnose diseases and a school safety resource. Let's wrap things up. This is episode 72 for the week of February 15th. I'm Matt Moneypenny.
And I'm Alex Ross.
Before we get started, though, our diagnosis code of the week is L24.7, irritant contact dermatitis due to plants except food.
You know, interestingly enough, this happened to me this weekend. Yeah. So this weekend was obviously Valentine's Day, right?
Okay.
And so frankly, we went out to dinner, as you do.
Yeah.
And this year, I told my significant other, no flowers. We're not doing that.
Okay.
But she knows how much I like houseplants. So she didn't get me like flowers. Instead, she got me a plant. This plant, yes, this plant in particular is of the spiky variety. Some might say a cactus, in fact.
Cacti, you mean?
But just one, a singular cactus, not multiple cacti. But it does belong to that family, if you will. And so naturally, when someone hands you a Valentine's bag with wrapping paper and everything, your first thing to do is
smash it with your hand.
Exactly. Squeeze it to find out what's
really
inside
hard.
of it. And we found out that it was very spiky. Now, it didn't create any stab wounds, however, because it had many, many small needles on it instead of larger ones. And so instead, it just created this ugly looking like rash type thing. And I had like a little, almost a reaction to it. My skin kind of flared up and inflamed. Some might even call it dermatitis. It was.
Did your palms get sweaty? Were your knees weak?
No.
Oh.
No.
Different.
They were
different
not.
Variety.
Yes.
Okay.
Thankfully. So yeah, that's my harrowing weekend story. Luckily, everything's back to normal. My new cactus buddy, his name is Ralph, and he now lives in my south-facing window.
Very nice. Very nice.
And
with that, let's get right to the news. First up, we have Digital Owl claims to help the insurance market. In healthcare, claim adjusters and underwriters read and parse hundreds of documents per case. Each year, the insurance market invests more than $3 billion in work hours devoted to collating and summarizing medical records. But Digital Owl, a provider of AI-powered medical claim analysis software, aims to solve these challenges. Using natural language processing, it extracts information from electronic medical records. The data is presented chronologically. Users can search and filter by condition, date, body part, body system, and provider. Every condition, date, and entry is clickable, which takes users to the source of the information in the record. The tool allows providers to replace the lengthy manual and error-prone process with automation and accuracy to better predict risk and claims.
The only question becomes, do we pass these savings on to the actual insured? And the cynic in me says probably not.
Right. Of course not.
Right.
It sounds nice, but it is cool that, AI is starting to come into the world of medical billing and coding. But
one of the obvious benefits that I might expect to see is the reduction of errors, which could potentially mean my claim gets paid first rather than denied for an error, basically. Which could save me a lot of headache, or my billing team a lot of headache in dealing with. So I like that. I'd love to see that kind of the dollars that they're saving goes to help out, in a reduction of insurance premiums, for example.
Right. One of the things to keep in mind, though, and I'm not saying that Digital Owl does this, but AI is a big buzzword right now in any industry because, there's a lot of stuff out there that actually uses AI that's really, really helpful and actually is AI driven, but there also is a lot of snake oil related AI stuff. And I'm not saying Digital Owl is doing this. It'd be cool to see their product, but just, something to keep in mind across the world. Like don't fall for the the AI buzzword.
That is a good point. What does AI even mean in the context of the insurance market?
Artificial insurance.
Next up, Dr. Algorithm will now diagnose your disease. Text mining of electronic health records can be used to identify and characterize patients with systemic lupus erythematosus. To identify SLE, the algorithm was designed to search EHRs for keywords to calculate the likelihood of the diagnosis. Algorithm-generated diagnoses were compared to official laboratory test diagnoses. To test the accuracy, a clinical immunologist manually checked the EHRs of 100 randomly selected patients. The immunologist assigned SLE to 55 of the 100 patients. 53 of these were correctly diagnosed by the algorithm. This tool may be useful for assessing large volumes of medical records data, such as clinical trials.
Yeah, so there's a ton of medical data in the world. It's almost like there's so much research that goes into healthcare that there's just no way that anybody can mine it all and find everything that's in it, all the different correlations, all of the different causations,
Right.
Everything like that, which what we end up with is, they find a trend. Usually a lot of times people will find the correlation and it'll be like, well, I mean, does that actually bring value, or is it just saying, okay, people who, drink water 5 times a day are more likely to have cancer? I mean, that doesn't seem like,
Right.
that doesn't seem truthful. So if there's anything that can assess large volumes of medical record data or any kind of medical data is usually a good thing, in my opinion.
Right. So what they were looking for in this algorithm was 14 different immune-mediated inflammatory diseases and the presence of 18 relevant symptoms. So using those two things, that's what they were looking for. Mm-hmm. So they weren't looking at diagnoses necessarily. They were looking for things that were related and using that to guess the chance that certain patients were then to be diagnosed with this other disease. And that's pretty cool. Imagine, if you will, a software that does this automatically. It has correlations just programmed into it, and it's constantly checking your health records. And each time you go into the doctor, it says you might want to run a test for something like this. This seems very likely, or this is greater than 50% chance. Maybe you want to input some extra data to see how that affects it, right? And you can monitor those chances or those relative probabilities over time and use that to inform your diagnostic procedures. I think that's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, no, that is sweet. Definitely very interesting. The stuff you can do with algorithms continues to blow me away. Next up, speak up and speak out if you have a concern. Wisconsin's Attorney General is reminding school students and families of a school safety resource for those in the community that fear someone may harm themselves or others. The Speak Up, Speak Out Resource Center offers 24/7 threat reporting systems, threat assessments, consultations, critical incident responses, and general school safety guidances. Students, parents, school staff, or any community members can submit a school safety concern. Staff workers work 24/7 to respond to tips by communicating with school administrators, counselors, and law enforcement if necessary. The reporting system has received tips regarding child abuse, cyberbullying, drugs, weapons, and many other issues, including 16 suicide threats. Tips have also led to more than 28 welfare checks.
I could see a service like this becoming one of the next 3-digit phone calls, right? Instead of calling 911 for an emergency, you dial, 624 or something like that.
It's always like one. It's always 2 ones and a number.
Usually, but I don't know if any of them are still open.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to look that up. But usually, you got 911. There's 211 for community services information, 311 for municipal government services non-emergency number, 411 for directory assistance, 511 traffic information or non-police emergency services or non-emergency police services.
Really?
611 for telephone company customer service and repair, 711 for TDD and relay services for the deaf and hard of hearing. 811 for underground public utility location. 911 for emergency services. So the only one that's not in use is 111 and 011.
Interesting. I didn't know that half of those were options.
Oh.
Shows you how much information I gather from the internet as opposed to phone nowadays.
Yeah. It seems that 011 and 111 are in use, and they usually indicate special dialing arrangements. So maybe we start adding the 2. Maybe we go 121.
There we are. Or we just change them to zeros, like 700 or 90.
Yeah, or 001.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But because this reporting system is statewide, right? It's done by the Attorney General's office. It's not like a specific school or something that's utilizing this. I see it as almost like a non-emergency number, right? Almost. But more so less immediate emergency and more potential emergency, right? It still needs some kind of immediate action, some kind of immediate intervention. But there isn't like get squad cars down here right this second kind of thing.
Yeah.
At least generally. And so having that central group that knows how to handle those more specific situations makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. With that, let's go into our next segment.
BREACH, Breach Patrol. It's a breach! All of the latest cybersecurity breaches.
Welcome to Breach Patrol, where we talk about the latest, the biggest, and the scariest breaches all across the world.
First up, law firm now has its own legal issues. A cyber attack on a Pennsylvania law firm has potentially exposed the personal health information of over 36,000 patients of the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. The law firm Charles J. Hilton and Associates PC, which provides legal services to UPMC, discovered suspicious activity in its employee email system last June. An investigation found that hackers gained access to several employee email accounts from April through June. In December, UPMC received a breach notification report from CJH confirming that the hacker may have accessed patient data. CJH is in the process of notifying potentially affected patients. There's no evidence that the data was misused. Complimentary credit monitoring and identity theft protection services are being offered by CJH to patients whose data was compromised.
Definitely a lot of abbreviations.
Yeah.
We got Charles J. Hilton and Associates PC, which is also CJH for short, and the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, aka UPMC, involved in this breach. If you couldn't follow that.
Right.
So,
exactly.
I mean, the classic complimentary credit monitoring and identity theft protection services. So that was offered, of course. We've talked about that before. An interesting thing is my girlfriend got a piece of mail through last weekend, and it was saying it was that big government breach that happened a month ago, and it said that you were affected. Here's what could be affected. Here's some free credit monitoring and identity theft protection software. So she now has that. She signed up for it. And it actually, when I was reading the letter, because she gave it to me, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I was like, I actually feel better for you that you have this credit card monitoring, because there's really nothing you can do about it. Right. It would be nice if it was just like a lifetime. Like, I feel like it should be almost a utility at this point, like so should internet, but that's a different conversation. But I feel like, internet and identity protection should probably be a utility at this point, because it's gotten so out of control with breaches that there's really no way to go about it.
I can see that. At some point, though, we're going to have to just come up with a different identification system, right? Because everybody's been exposed so many times.
Yeah.
That our only option is to really just wipe it and start over. And to be fair, like, social security number was never meant to be an identity thing. It was never meant to be an identification number. It was only supposed to be the account number that you access your social security benefits. But because everyone had one, it became that number.
Yep. And also, credit reports didn't happen until like 1989. Credit scores.
Interesting.
So,
Well, to be fair, I don't know if I don't know if this is right, but in my mind, I feel like I remember clearly in third grade being taught that the Great Depression, a lot of it came out because people started using credit and couldn't pay it back.
yeah. Well, I mean, credit scores are definitely new, but overall, it's a good thing because before credit scores were a thing, people were like, it was up to the person, the loaner, like the bank,
Right.
the person that was working at the bank. Where, I mean, obviously, if it's just based on, okay, I'm going to give me like your bills and see proof of purchase for those bills. And then obviously you look like you're a trustworthy person. Like, you know what I mean? It starts getting really biased really quickly.
Right,
So
right.
overall, it's a good thing. But it does have some unfortunate things that can come from it, such as breaches.
True.
Next up, Code Red from CD Projekt Red. The Poland-based video game developer CD Projekt Red has suffered a data breach conducted by unknown hackers demanding ransom. The targeted attack compromised some of the company's internal systems. The hacker collected company data and successfully encrypted some devices. CDPR, or CD Projekt Red's, backups remain intact and the IT infrastructure has been secured. To the best of its knowledge, data of players or users was not breached, but the company still recommends resetting user credentials just in case. CD Projekt Red says that it wouldn't pay ransom or negotiate with the hacker, and it will cooperate with Polish authorities and IT forensic specialists.
I remember hearing about this one.
Yeah, I do too.
If I remember correctly, Cyberpunk 2077, which is like the newest Cyberpunk, the entire source code was leaked from the attack.
So that's ironic because that is their. So obviously that's their. That's like one of the biggest video game titles of 2021,
right?
Or 2020, right. I guess is when it came out, and it was kind of a dud from what I heard. But it still sold like crazy. But the ironic part about it is it's cyberpunk, so it's all about like futuristic technology, and then CD Projekt Red gets breached. So it's kind of ironic. But I also think that the reason why video game companies get breached in the first place is because of disgruntled gamers being like, this game sucks. Like, I waited this much time for this game and I'm disappointed in it. So I'm going to get back at the development company and breach them. I feel like that's probably something that seems pretty reasonable, or not, doesn't seem reasonable, but that seems like what happens.
I think that might not be too far-fetched, especially because a lot of people, I feel like people who are generally good at computer programming also tend to enjoy video games. So there could be,
I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. There. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like people who are salespeople usually like sports because it's really relatable. Same kind of thing.
And finally, Emsisoft apologizes for soft security. The New Zealand cybersecurity company Emsisoft issued an apology over a configuration error that led to a breach. A database containing log records was accessible to unauthorized third parties between January 8th and February 3rd. This was an automated attack not specifically targeted at Emsisoft. Only parts of the affected database were accessed, but it's impossible to determine exactly which data rows were accessed. The company took the impacted system offline and launched an investigation. Impacted data consists of technical logs produced by the company's endpoint protection software, which generally don't contain personal information. But they noticed that 14 customer email addresses were part of the scan logs. These customers have been contacted. It's really hard with all these breaches that a lot of them tend to be almost the same thing over and over.
Yep.
And we've said this before, and I hate to sound like a broken clock or whatever, but it's not so much if you'll get breached, it's more so when, and what will you do to mitigate.
And how.
Exactly. So take your security seriously, because it might be something as simple as your team made a mistake, oops, and now you have a breach.
Yeah,
right? It may not even be a malicious hack or something that crazy.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of the breaches that we discussed that kind of have a pattern are, disgruntled employee, accidental employee mistake, database log records that are made public in some capacity that are found, or, just an upset customer or ransomware. I mean, ransomware is obviously one of the bigger ones too. So it seems like the majority of the breaches that we discussed fall into that category. So
right.
It's obvious that we're in this segment, we're pointing out the pattern that, breaches are happening more and more often. And here's the categories of breaches. So just so you're aware, so that you can put like your compliance policies in certain places where you need to prevent them.
And that's it for this week's wrap up of your weekly healthcare news. I'm Alex Ross.
And I'm Matt Moneypenny.
And we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of The Bandage. This week's episode was written and produced by eTactics. eTactics is a leading revenue cycle solutions organization committed to providing innovative, web-based solutions that improve our clients' cash management and customer relationships. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.